All right, buckle up, everybody. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving headfirst into the world of Donald Trump and his most unforgettable quotes.
Oh, this is going to be good.
Yeah, we've got a goldmine of material here from a listicle called Top 10 Craziest Donald Trump Quotes.
I've seen that one.
But we're not stopping at the list itself because, let's be honest, the real fun is in the comment section.
Always is.
So get ready because we're about to uncover not just what Trump said, but also, and maybe more importantly, how people reacted.
Yeah, that gives you such a raw and unfiltered look at the impact of his words. It's like a window into the soul of public opinion.
It really is. Okay, first up, the quote that launched 1,000 think pieces. I will build a great, great wall on our southern border, and I will make Mexico pay for that wall. Mark my words.
This wasn't just about, like, bricks and mortar, was it?
No, not at all. This statement ignited a huge debate about symbolism in politics. Some people took the wall very literally, imagining this massive physical barrier, but others saw it as more of a metaphor.
A metaphor for what? For stricter immigration policies, representing a desire for, stronger borders and tighter control over who comes in and out of the country.
It's interesting, right? The wall itself became this kind of Rorschach test for people's anxieties and hopes about immigration.
Absolutely. And we see that reflected so clearly in the comments. One person might interpret the wall as purely symbolic, representing Trump's stance on immigration.
Right.
But then you'll have another comment arguing that a physical wall is just completely impractical and ultimately ineffective, highlighting all the, logistical and political challenges of actually trying to build such a thing.
Yeah. It's amazing how a single phrase can be interpreted in such wildly different ways.
That speaks volumes about how we all bring our own preconceived notions and biases to the table.
Okay, well, from symbolic walls to scientific controversies, let's turn up the heat with this one. Trump once said, "The concept of global warming was created by and for the Chinese." Now, this one really threw fuel on the fire, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. This goes beyond a simple policy disagreement. It taps into this deep-seated skepticism of scientific authority, which honestly was a growing trend during Trump's rise.
So he was tapping into something that was already there.
Exactly. And by, dismissing climate change as a fabrication, he appealed to a segment of the population that felt distrustful of experts and institutions.
And we see that distrust reflected in the comments.
Oh,
Right?
yeah. You'll have one person passionately defending the scientific consensus on climate change, citing tons of evidence, talking about the urgency of addressing the issue.
Right.
But then right alongside that, you'll have another comment questioning the validity of climate science altogether,
Wow.
echoing Trump's skepticism and highlighting the challenge of, combating misinformation in this age of information overload.
It's like everyone's got their own set of facts.
It can feel that way sometimes. It makes it so hard to even have a productive conversation.
Yeah. Okay, well, brace yourselves, everyone, because we're about to enter the, what did he just say, territory. Trump, referring to his daughter Ivanka, once said, "She does have a very nice figure. I've said if Ivanka weren't my daughter, perhaps I'd be dating her."
Wow.
Yeah, wow. That's where the personal collides head-on with the political. I mean, that quote generated a wave of reactions. Disgust, disbelief, attempts at dark humor.
I bet.
It really forced people to confront the blurring of lines between Trump's private life and his public persona.
And how did that play out in the comments?
It was a battleground.
Yeah.
You had some expressing outright revulsion, calling the statement creepy and inappropriate,
I can see that.
questioning his fitness for office based on that alone.
Oh, right.
But then others tried to downplay it, suggesting it was just a joke, albeit a tasteless one. A joke.
It's fascinating, though, how it tapped into pre-existing anxieties about power dynamics.
Especially within families.
Exactly. It became fuel for those already suspicious of Trump's character and judgment.
Okay, well, let's move from awkward to aspirational. Let's talk about Trump's, Trump tower-sized pronouncements of wealth. Like when he said, "I don't need anyone's money, that's nice, I'm really rich," or "My father gave me a small loan of $1 million." Did these statements make people feel like they were winning, or did they just make them wince?
Well, for many, especially that small loan comment, it really solidified the image of Trump as detached from the economic realities of everyday Americans.
Yeah.
It reinforced the perception that he was out of touch with the struggles of working class people.
And that disconnect is evident in the comments, right?
Absolutely. One person might express anger, viewing those statements as blatant bragging, totally insensitive to those struggling financially.
Yeah.
But then you might find another comment that, while acknowledging the vast wealth disparity, finds humor in the absurdity of $1 million loan being considered small.
Right, right.
It shows how people process these statements through their own lens of personal experience.
And now for a quote that, honestly, sends chills down my spine. I could shoot somebody and wouldn't lose any voters. This takes us beyond policy debates and straight into the heart of power dynamics. What does this reveal about the nature of leadership and loyalty?
That's a tough one. It really sent shockwaves through the political landscape, raising serious concerns about the potential for unaccountable power and blind allegiance. It forces us to confront the question, what are the limits of loyalty, and at what point does it become dangerous?
And what are people saying about this one?
Well, some interpret it as evidence of a cult of personality surrounding Trump, meaning that his supporters would stand by him regardless of his actions.
No matter what.
Right. But then others are just horrified by the statement. They emphasize the importance of holding leaders accountable and rejecting the notion that any individual is above the law.
That no one's above the law. Well said.
It's a fundamental principle of a functioning democracy.
Okay, well, we're diving into deep waters now. Let's address the infamous grab her by the pee quote. This ignited a firestorm of controversy, and rightfully so.
It did, and it had a seismic impact on the 2016 election. It became a focal point in these debates about gender, respect, and what constitutes acceptable behavior for a presidential candidate. It forced a national conversation about deeply ingrained sexism and the normalization of misogynistic language.
That's a big conversation to have.
Huge, and so important.
What are people saying about this quote?
Many are expressing disgust and anger, arguing that such language is never acceptable, especially from someone aspiring to be a role model for the nation.
Right.
They felt it was indicative of a broader culture that disrespects and devalues women.
And then there's the other side.
Yeah. Some tried to dismiss it as locker room talk, a phrase that itself sparked further debate about societal norms and the need to challenge toxic masculinity.
It's almost like, no matter what your stance is, this quote forced people to really examine their own values.
Exactly. It brought these issues to the forefront in a way that couldn't be ignored.
Now let's unpack a cluster of quotes that reveal a pattern of troubling statements about race and identity. There's the comment about preferring short guys that wear yarmulkes every day to count his money, and the moment he pointed to a black supporter at a rally and said, "Look at my African-American over here."
Oh, those are just the tip of the iceberg, unfortunately. Along with his claims that Mexican immigrants are bringing drugs and crime, and his infamous shoal countries remark, these statements weren't isolated incidents.
Yeah.
They formed a pattern that raised serious concerns about racial bias and the use of language to dehumanize and marginalize entire groups of people.
And how are people responding to these quotes?
The comments section reflects the pain and anger of those targeted by these remarks. People of color are sharing their experiences with racism and discrimination, highlighting the very real impact of such rhetoric.
They're making their voices heard.
Yes, and they're calling out the harmful stereotypes perpetuated by these statements and the way they contribute to a climate of fear and intolerance.
This is clearly a very sensitive and important topic, one that requires careful consideration.
Absolutely. These reactions underscore the ongoing struggle for racial justice in America and the importance of recognizing how language can be used to uphold or dismantle systems of oppression.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and peek into the mirror of Trump's self-perception. He once said, "I had some beautiful pictures taken in which I had a big smile on my face. I looked happy, I looked content, I looked like a very nice person, which in theory I am." He seems very sure of himself.
He does, doesn't he? And then there's his claim about having one of the highest IQs, or his repeated insistence that nobody has more respect for women than me, and that he is the least racist person you will ever meet.
Yeah, those are some pretty bold statements.
Yeah, they are. And these statements, often delivered with that unwavering confidence, provide a window into Trump's self-image. But they also reveal a stark contrast between how he saw himself and how he was perceived by a large segment of the population.
And that contrast is evident in the comments, I imagine.
Oh, absolutely. The comment section is just rife with mockery and disbelief. Many are pointing out contradictions between his self-assessments and his documented words and actions.
Right.
It further deepens the divide between perception and reality.
It's like two completely different worlds colliding.
In a way, it is.
From self-perception to immigration policies, let's examine one of Trump's most controversial declarations. I will never apologize for banning Muslims from entering America. This needs to be understood within the context of his administration's travel ban, which targeted several Muslim-majority countries.
Right. This policy, it sparked intense debate and legal challenges, with critics arguing that it was discriminatory, violated religious freedom, and really played into Islamophobia.
Big accusation.
They are. But it raised fundamental questions about national security, individual liberties, and the values upon which America was founded.
And how do people respond?
The comments reflected this deep division, with some expressing support for the ban, citing concerns about terrorism and national security, while others condemned it as a violation of human rights and a betrayal of American ideals.
It sounds like a very complex and sensitive issue.
It is, and it highlights this complex and often fraught relationship between national security and individual liberties, a tension that's been a recurring theme throughout American history.
Okay, well, let's wrap up this whirlwind tour of Trumpisms with a quote that, perfectly captures his, shall we say, penchant for repetition. I don't repeat myself. I don't repeat myself.
Oh, the irony.
Right.
Well, despite his claims, repetition was a defining characteristic of his communication style, whether intentional or not. It often served to amplify his message.
It made it stick.
Exactly. Think about all the phrases he popularized. Fake news, make America great again, build the wall, love them or hate them. They became part of the national lexicon.
They did.
Yeah.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, from walls and climate change to gender, race, wealth, power, and immigration.
We have. It's a lot to process.
It is. And it's just the beginning of our deep dive. So hold on to those thoughts, everyone, because when we come back, we'll be exploring the lasting impact of Trump's rhetoric and how it continues to shape the political landscape even today.
Stay tuned, folks. It's going to get even more interesting. This is just the tip of the iceberg.
Welcome back to the deep dive, everyone. It's amazing to think about all those eyebrow-raising Trump quotes we just went through. They weren't just sound bites. They were like seismic shifts in the political landscape.
Oh, yeah, they really were.
Yeah.
I think it's important to view these pronouncements within their historical context. This was a period marked by deep political polarization, anxieties about economic instability, and the rise of social media as this dominant force in shaping public opinion.
It really was this perfect storm brewing, and then boom, Trump's words were the lightning strikes that just ignited the tinderbox.
That's a great analogy. Let's revisit the wall for a second, for instance. It wasn't just about immigration policy. It tapped into this deeper fear of cultural change and a desire to cling to a perceived notion of traditional America. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like for some people, the wall symbolized a return to a simpler time, a protection against the perceived threats of globalization and demographic shifts.
Exactly. And his dismissal of climate change as a Chinese hoax, that wasn't just about science denial. It was about rejecting the very idea of collective action and global responsibility. It appealed to a sense of individualism and a distrust of international institutions.
It's really a stark reminder of how vulnerable we all are to misinformation, especially when it confirms our existing biases.
Oh, absolutely. And then there's the grab her by the peak quote. Phew, that wasn't just about lewd language. It ripped open this national conversation about power, respect, and consent.
For a lot of women, it was a chilling reminder of the everyday sexism they face. And it really fueled the growing #MeToo movement, which empowered survivors to speak out against sexual harassment and assault.
It forced society to confront this uncomfortable reality that even in the 21st century, women's voices are often dismissed or marginalized.
And his racially charged statements, like the short guys with yarmulkes comment and the look at my African-American moment, those weren't just gaffes. They were like dog whistles to a segment of the population that felt threatened by changing demographics and a perceived loss of status.
Yeah, and those statements normalized racist rhetoric and emboldened those who held prejudiced views, contributing to a rise in hate crimes and a more polarized social climate.
And what about his pronouncements about his wealth? Like the infamous small loan comment. Those weren't just bragging, were they? They kind of exacerbated the sense of economic inequality and fueled resentment towards the elite.
Absolutely. It reinforced the perception that the system was rigged against working class people and that the American dream was increasingly out of reach for many.
It's like he was pouring salt on the wound.
In a way, he was. And then his claims about respecting women and being the least racist person, well, they just felt so hollow in the face of his actions and his own words.
They did. It really highlights the importance of actions speaking louder than words.
It does. And it eroded trust in leadership, which has really profound profound implications for the health of a democracy.
And, his statement about being able to shoot someone and not losing voters, while likely hyperbole, tapped into a disturbing trend, this rise of charismatic leadership and the potential for blind loyalty that can erode democratic norms.
Right. It raises all sorts of questions about the psychological mechanisms at play when individuals surrender critical thinking and just embrace authoritarian figures.
It's something we've seen throughout history.
Yeah, and it's definitely a cautionary tale we should all heed.
And his hardline stance on immigration, embodied in the Muslim ban, exploited deep-seated fears about terrorism and national security, but it also tapped into this darker strain of xenophobia and Islamophobia that's been simmering beneath the surface of American society for way too long.
It really did. And this policy, and all the rhetoric surrounding it, contributed to a climate of fear and suspicion towards Muslim communities.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
It is. It eroded the principles of religious freedom and tolerance that are, foundational to American democracy.
So as we can see, these quotes weren't just words. They were catalysts that accelerated existing social and political trends. They amplified divisions and exacerbated tensions that we're still dealing with today.
It's like he took a sledgehammer to the fault lines that already existed in American society, and we're all still feeling the aftershocks.
And here's the thing, even though he's no longer in office, the way he wielded language, the way he tapped into people's emotions and anxieties has left an indelible mark on our political discourse.
Oh, absolutely. It's a playbook that others have adopted, unfortunately, for better or for worse. We see it in the rise of populism, the spread of misinformation, and the erosion of trust in traditional media and institutions.
So as we move forward, it's crucial that we understand the dynamics at play here, that we recognize the power of language, and that we engage in critical thinking and respectful dialogue, even when it's uncomfortable.
Couldn't agree more. We need to be aware of our own biases, be willing to listen to opposing viewpoints, and, seek out information from reliable sources.
Maybe, just maybe, by understanding the forces that brought us to this point, we can chart a course towards a more civil and informed public discourse.
Fingers crossed. It won't be easy, that's for sure.
No, it won't. But hey, gotta have hope, right?
Anyways.
As we've been going through all these Trumpisms, it's really hit me that they're not just about him.
That's a really important point. His words were like this mirror reflecting back the hopes, fears, and anxieties of a huge chunk of the American population.
It's like he gave a voice to sentiments that were already bubbling beneath the surface, whether we wanted to acknowledge them or not.
Exactly, like take the build the wall rhetoric. It really resonated with people who felt left behind by globalization, who were seeing their communities changing and their economic prospects dwindling. The wall became this symbol of protection, of holding on to a way of life they felt was slipping away.
Yeah, and his dismissal of climate change as a hoax, it wasn't just about science denial. It was about rejecting the whole idea of collective action and global responsibility.
Right. It was like this appeal to a very strong sense of individualism and distrust of international institutions.
It tapped into this deep-seated skepticism of experts, a belief that common sense solutions were better than all the complexities of scientific data.
Oh, for sure.
And then, the infamous grab her by the pea quote. That revealed a deeply ingrained misogyny that, honestly, I think still permeates our culture.
It exposed how normalized objectification and disrespect towards women are, and it really sparked a long overdue reckoning with the pervasiveness of sexual harassment and assault.
His racially charged statements like the short guys with yarmulkes comment and the look at my African American moment, they expose the ugliness of prejudice that I think we as a society often try to just sweep under the rug.
And they normalized racist language and stereotypes, contributing to this climate of fear and intolerance towards minority groups.
And his bragging about his wealth, the small loan comment that just fueled resentment towards the elite, widening the gap between the haves and the have-nots.
It definitely reinforced the idea that the system was rigged against working-class Americans, that the American dream was becoming more and more elusive.
And his claims about respecting women and being the least racist person, well, they just rang so hollow given his actions and his own words.
Right. It really highlighted how actions speak so much louder than words.
And how that lack of alignment eroded trust in leadership, which is so crucial for a healthy democracy.
Absolutely.
And, that the statement about being able to shoot someone and not losing voters, while probably hyperbole, was still chilling, right? It revealed this potential for blind loyalty, the erosion of democratic norms.
It tapped into the dangers of charismatic leadership, this tendency to just abandon critical thinking when a figure promises these simple solutions to very complex problems.
And his hardline stance on immigration, the Muslim ban, it exploited deep-seated fears about terrorism and national security, but it also tapped into this darker strain of xenophobia and Islamophobia that has existed in American society for far too long.
It really did. And that policy and all the rhetoric surrounding it contributed to a climate of fear and suspicion towards Muslim communities.
So, it's clear these quotes weren't just words. They were catalysts that accelerated existing social and political trends. They amplified divisions and made tensions even worse, tensions we're still dealing with today.
It's like he took a sledgehammer to the cracks that already existed in American society, and we're still feeling the aftershocks.
And here's the thing. Even though he's not in office anymore, the way he used language, the way he tapped into people's emotions and anxieties, it's left a lasting impact on how we talk about politics.
Oh, without a doubt. It's almost like a playbook that others have picked up, for better or worse. We see it in the rise of populism, the spread of misinformation, and the declining trust in traditional media and institutions.
So as we move forward, it's really critical that we understand what happened.
Yeah.
That we recognize the power of language and engage in critical thinking and respectful dialogue, even when it's tough.
I couldn't agree more. We need to be so aware of our own biases, willing to really listen to viewpoints that challenge us, and get our information from sources we can trust.
This deep dive has taken us through some pretty dark territory, but I think there's hope here.
Hope.
Yeah, hope. Because by shining a light on these uncomfortable truths, by understanding the forces that shape our beliefs and behaviors, we can start to build a more just, equitable, and informed society.
I like that. I share your optimism. It's not going to be easy, but by having these tough conversations, by embracing empathy and critical thinking, we can create a better future.
Well said. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Trump's most memorable quotes. We hope it's made you think, made you question, and maybe even sparked a little hope. And remember, the conversation doesn't end here. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep striving for a better tomorrow.